Good to go. Hello, everyone. We're here today to present a seminar to you on enhancing legal pathways for domestic violence victim survivors. I'm Stephen Vaughan. I'm Manager of the Family Law Division here at Legal Services Commission, and I have with me Gemma Hunter, who's one of our lawyers in the Family Safety and Support area, and we'll come a little bit later to what that area does and how it works. So thank you for coming. And firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the country. You can see on the slides a piece of artwork which is in our offices, which was commissioned by the Legal Services Commission to note our commitment to the South Australian community. I wish to acknowledge the Kaurna people as the traditional owners of the lands that we're meeting on, and anybody who's joined from other lands, recognising the traditional owners of those lands, and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. We recognise and respect their unique cultural heritage, customs and spiritual beliefs and relationship with the land, and we pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that sovereignty of the land was never ceded. So just a few housekeeping things. Firstly, you'll see that there's a chat function as usual in Teams to ask questions. We have a small team of people there who are looking out for your questions. So you can put your questions in at any time and we'll get to those at the end of the webinar, depending on time permitting. Also, if there's any technical issues you run into, please use the chat function in Teams to let us know about them. There's a handout which will be linked in the chat. And lastly, we won't automatically send out attendance certificates, but if you need a certificate to prove you attended the seminar, please send an email to the address on the screen, cle@lsc.sa.gov.au. Okay, so now moving to what we'll cover. The first and really quite critical starting point is, what is a multidisciplinary approach? Well, why is it necessary to address domestic and family violence? Secondly, Jim is going to cover the common legal issues faced by victim survivors of domestic and family violence. Thirdly, we're going to look at who are we. You probably understand that we're a legal aid agency in part, but there are many other things that we do. So it's a big question. And then as part of that question, we'll look at some specific programs that we engage with. Then I'll deal with trauma-informed training for lawyers, which is a program that we're recently engaged with, and then how to contact us. And we have a slide there with that information, and so you're able to contact us for further information or assistance. So I'll pass over now to Gemma, who's going to talk about why is a multidisciplinary approach necessary. Thanks, Gemma.
Thanks, Stephen. So domestic and family violence, which I'm going to refer to as, or the slides refer to as DFV, it's complex and it's multifaceted. And we know that victim survivors are affected in a number of ways. So whether that be physically, psychologically, emotionally, financially, spiritually, and the list goes on. And because of this, we know that victim survivors tend to have needs that span legal, medical, psychological, and social. And the effects of domestic and family violence are not only felt by the individual, but they're felt by families, kinships, and communities at large. So some examples of that would be, we think about children who are exposed to domestic violence. They face developmental, behavioural, and emotional challenges. There can be breakdowns of family and kinship structures due to domestic and family violence. There can be disruption of other support systems, and for example, a person might be isolated from their extended family, whether that be due to manipulation by perpetrator or generally just the stigma that domestic and family violence tends to attract. We know that domestic and family violence tends to or can lead to a cycle of violence. So children who are exposed to abuse may end up perpetrating abuse, or they may experience abuse themselves in the future. And there are economic and social costs, I guess, at large, associated with the effects of domestic and family violence, which means that there's more demand on community services, shelters, housing, and other services. So when we think about a legally holistic approach to addressing domestic and family violence, this means not only addressing the immediate legal needs, but also the interconnected social, emotional, financial, and safety challenges that the individual and the family do experience. So in our experience, having legal services partner with other disciplines can enable the victim survivors to have access to not only legal assistance, and which is obviously extremely important, but also at the same time they can access medical care, housing support, financial support, counselling, and the aim of that is to try and have a holistic approach and address various needs at once. Collaboration means that domestic and family violence can be better detected sooner, and the victim survivor can be informed of their rights sooner, and hopefully there can be early intervention to protect victim survivors and children. Hopefully early intervention looks like a person receiving advice and then being able to make informed decisions about their relationship, but also importantly, perhaps where that person has not had advice and they've remained in a relationship, the intervention means that we can help in those really high risk situations. So like I said, domestic and family violence can be identified more quickly, immediate safety concerns can be addressed. Collaboration also ensures that there's a more streamlined referral pathway between services to allow for wraparound support. I guess as a victim survivor, experiencing the burden of having to contact or seek out multiple different services and be placed on waiting lists and not know when they're going to be contacted. Having that collaboration in place means that it's taking the burden away from them and allowing, I guess, better access for them to have all of those services help them. And legal professionals and law enforcement can work with social services to help perpetrators as well, hopefully with opportunities for rehabilitation. So I guess that's looking at another side of domestic and family violence and how can we assist in that space. And education between services is obviously paramount so that it's sort of shifting the burden away from one service in particular and information sharing and educating one another about the nuances of domestic and family violence and how can we best help victim survivors. So up on the slide there, we've got a list of common legal issues that, in our experience, victim survivors will face. This isn't an exhaustive list. There could very well be other issues, and every person's circumstances are unique. As lawyers, we are required to turn our mind to a number of social, psychological, financial and other issues that are going on for our clients, so that we can provide detailed advice and act accordingly. So I guess as an example of that, if we are giving family law advice to someone, we need to know and understand things like, are the children being exposed or subject to the violence? Is the victim survivor parent able to act protectively for the child? Is there drugs or alcohol involved, or are there mental health issues? Is the victim survivor homeless, and are they isolated from family, friends and other supports? And can anyone help them look after the children? And as another example, perhaps if we're advising our client about seeking an intervention order, we need to understand, does the victim actually feel safe to cut ties with the perpetrator and end the relationship? Bearing in mind that often leaving the relationship is the most unsafe time for victim. Or, if the victim is the victim survivor in financial distress, meaning that they feel unable to leave the relationship and seek safety. Deciding to leave a relationship and commence a legal process can be very complex, and it shouldn't be taken lightly. So in order for us to best assist our clients and provide the best advice, we need to know what other kinds of supports they're receiving for social, psychological, financial, and other issues. So we've got a bit of a mind map on the slide there. We have a number of specially funded domestic and family violence programs at the Legal Services Commission, and all of these programs involve some level of collaboration between lawyers and other professionals. On the slide, you'll see that the Family Safety and Support team, which sits under the Family Law Division, is split into two streams, where we have the Integrated Services team and we have the Litigation team. Integrated Services includes the Domestic Violence Unit, the Safe and Well Kids program, Health Justice Partnership programs, and the Mental Health Support program. All of these programs provide advice and assistance to women who are affected by domestic or family violence, but they differ in how they accept referrals. And we'll talk in turn about each team in a moment. But I guess the general focus of these teams is on early intervention. The other stream is the litigation team, and that team assists clients who have matters that are being heard in court. So that's the WIDFACIS, Women's Domestic Violence Court Assistance Service, and the FAS, Family Advocacy Support Service. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about those teams in a moment. And the mental health program, although it sits under integrated services, it really is quite well integrated throughout the Commission. It's a team of social workers who assist with various non-legal matters, including with housing, Centrelink, applications for financial grants, and assistance in court. Again, we'll give you some more information about that soon. And just another important takeaway is that clients do not need to have a grant of legal aid to have an appointment with any of the teams that you can see up on the slide. So the Safe and Well Kids program is a partnership between the Women's Safety Services, Relationships Australia, and the Legal Services Commission. It's designed to support children and young people who are aged between 0 and 14, who have been identified as being at risk of domestic and family violence, and often where the Department of Child Protection has intervened. So while this program is child-focused, the families of the child or children at risk also receive assistance from all three services to ensure that wraparound support is provided. And I guess the program recognises that where a child is at risk, a family-centric approach is necessary to ensure that all family members have access to supports such that they are then better able to provide a safe environment for the child. The next team that I'll speak about here is the Domestic Violence Unit. The Domestic Violence Unit is a northern-based service and is funded to assist women and girls in the northern regions of Adelaide and SA who are affected by domestic violence. We have an office based in Elizabeth, but our catchment is quite broad. So we can assist women in the north, the northeast, the northwest, but also extending through to the Barossa and Gawler regions and to regional Port Augusta, Whyalla and Port Pirie. We have a social worker embedded into our team who assists with emergency payments, Centrelink, and importantly, they can go with clients to the police station to help them make statements. and various other non-legal matters as well. As well as that, the Domestic Violence Unit has a partnership established with Anglicare Financial Counselling. Their office is literally just next door, and it really allows for that smooth referral pathway for women to also receive financial counselling. There are two other important partnerships, including one with NALHN, the Northern Adelaide Local Health Network, and with the Women's Safety Services, and I'll go into that in the following slides. So a health justice partnership is a collaboration between legal and health services, whereby a lawyer is embedded into services that provide for people's health and well-being. These partnerships are an approach to tackling quite complex and interconnected health, legal and social challenges. And there are already a number of health justice partnerships operating across Australia, some which are to address DV and some which are not. Studies have found that there is a direct correlation between a person's health status and the presence of legal issues. And a person with legal issues is more likely to have stress-related health issues, and they may require medical care. And in particular, health justice partnerships are really important for addressing domestic and family violence. We know that women experiencing domestic or family violence are more likely than other women to require the support of health services, and equally, they will also have a range of legal needs. So at the Commission, we have 3 health justice partnerships. We have the Women's and Children's Health Network partnership. We have a partnership with the Northern Adelaide Local Health Network, and we also have a partnership with the Women's Safety Services and SAPOL through a multi-agency hub. I'll just speak a little bit more about the importance of health justice partnerships when it comes to specifically domestic and family violence. We know victim survivors commonly interact with healthcare providers, so whether that's a GP, midwives, nurses, social workers, and also emergency departments. And hospitals they're specifically mandated to screen for domestic and family violence. So it's often the case that first responders and health professionals are going to be the first to notice the signs, such as physical injuries, mental health issues, stress-related illness, and often they might be the first people that a victim survivor will disclose their circumstances to. Unfortunately, we know that lawyers tend to be a slightly mistrusted profession, or perhaps just not an understood profession. And a lot of the time, women might feel that or victims generally might feel that they're unable to access a legal service for various reasons, whether that be their perceived or real financial constraints, a lack of awareness of the services that are available. Perhaps they feel as though there aren't inclusive services available, or they may fear that if they talk to a lawyer, they're going to start a legal process. But we know, as said before, it's pretty much inevitable that someone experiencing domestic and family violence is going to have at least one legal issue. So another, I guess, issue is that some victim survivors may not characterise that what they are experiencing is abuse, or they might not consider that they do have any legal issues until their situation reaches a point of crisis. So having a lawyer actually integrated into the health system ensures that victim survivors can be referred for that immediate legal advice and assistance in circumstances where they may not otherwise have sought out any help. It's really important for early intervention. It's important that women can be equipped with information and advice. Even if they're not ready to leave a relationship, they might remember that information for the future, or they may, at the very least, remember the contact details of a lawyer so they know where to go in the future. The programs that we have, the Women's and Children's Health Network program, that program sees a lawyer co-locate at the Women's and Children's Hospital on 5 mornings per week. And referrals can come through from not just the hospital, but also any of the linked services. So whether that's CAFS, CAMS, Yarrow Place, Cedar Health, or the Aboriginal Health Service. The NALHN partnership operates a little bit differently, as we don't have co-location set up, but solicitors can attend the hospital to meet with clients and have appointments, and we receive referrals from the Lyle McEwen Hospital, the Modbury Hospital, Child and Family Health Services, and the Watto Purina Aboriginal Health Service. And then thirdly, we've got the Northern Multi-Agency Hub. This is a space based in the north which involves collaboration between WISA, SAPOL and the DVU. The clients that we support through the hub are women who have recently entered emergency accommodation, and they tend to have very high needs. And being referred to multiple services can be very confusing and burdensome for victim survivors, as we've touched on before. Understandably, they can become quite overwhelmed about who they need to contact, which service they're speaking to. And so again, having the agencies cross-collaborate in the one place allows for that smooth referral pathway, and having them receive quick legal advice.
Thanks, Gemma. If you think back to the mind map that we saw earlier and the family safety and support line, the bottom part was family safety integrated services, and so Gemma's covered that part, and the top part was our litigation services, our family safety litigation. And so I'm going to work my way through this, and the starting point is our Family Advocacy and Support Service, our FAS service. This is a service which we run locally here in South Australia, but it runs across Australia through other legal aid commissions as well. Something that's significant to note in this space is that about 84% of parenting applications to the Federal Circuit and Family Court involve an allegation of family and domestic violence. That's a really significant percentage, you'll understand. And within the court process, it's useful to consider the range of things that come into play when an application is lodged. One of the first things is the court has some systems established to help us address domestic and family violence. If an application reveals a significant level of violence or crossing a particular threshold, the matter might be referred to what they call the Lighthouse program, and there may be an assessment as part of that, a triage assessment using DOORS, which is a risk screening tool with triage assessments, a questionnaire-based tool, and if it meets a certain threshold, then it can be referred to the event list, for example, which is a specialised court pathway to support high-risk cases, cases that are identified as having significant risk factors, and the focus in those cases is on early information gathering and intervention, having an interim hearing if need be really early in the process, and ensuring that families are supported through the process. In any event, on both pathways, whether it's an event list pathway or otherwise, case management is really important in these cases, and judges and other judicial officers are really focused on ensuring that cases are managed proactively and that appropriate referrals are made, for example, to triage counselling. Another issue is, I should mention here, which is training for judges. One of the significant changes that's affected judges and judicial officers and other staff at the Federal Circuit and Family Court is the court's commitment to training in relation to domestic and family violence. And a lot of this training has been in conjunction with David Mandel and the Safe and Together Institute, which operates has a significant footprint in Australia and in the US. An aspect of FAS, or two aspects of FAS, are firstly that there are lawyers, and secondly that there are social workers. You might be familiar perhaps, or know a little about the kind of duty services that operate in the criminal law jurisdiction, where people often queue up in the morning to see the duty solicitor. It doesn't quite work that way in the family jurisdiction. Very often it may be that a judge dealing with a matter identifies that a party is struggling, and so would make a referral to our FAS coordinator, who would identify someone who can assist, whether that needs to be a lawyer or whether perhaps that needs to be a social worker. Lawyers in court can advocate for a victim survivor who's going through the process and can give them some level of advice and assistance. If something more serious is happening, perhaps a person, a party in a matter, it becomes dysregulated or very distressed, or simply perhaps is struggling with the enormity of the court process, then sometimes that's a case where one of our social workers in that space will be able to sit down with the person, help them regulate, work through their anxieties, sometimes even sit in court with them. Every case is unique, every case is different, and what actually happens on the ground really depends on the assessment that's made at the time. The other thing that our FAS workers can do, apart from advocacy, is, and speaking and helping them through the stressful court processes involved, is to connect clients with relevant services such as for counselling, housing support, financial help, and mental health support. So the other quite significant area in our litigation space within the family safety and support team is family safety litigation involving women who are seeking intervention orders. In the state of South Australia, although police will seek an intervention order sometimes for a woman where they're charging the perpetrator with an offence, often if they're not charging the perpetrator, they may not pursue an intervention order, or there may be other circumstances where a woman is seeking an intervention order for her protection. And so the Women's Domestic Violence Court Assistance Service, what for short we call WDVCS, provides legal assistance and advice and representation for women in relation to private intervention orders. And that's a free service. It's there's no means test for that service. We operate that service throughout all of the metropolitan courts and also Mount Gambier. We have staff who travel down to Mount Gambier to provide representation. A critical thing about having a duty solicitor available to do this kind of work is it ensures that any women who are applying for intervention orders have the benefit of free legal advice. These things are legal proceedings, and so they're complicated. And whilst some self-represented parties manage extraordinarily well, many people do benefit from having a lawyer available. That team can also make referrals through to our other teams within the Legal Services Commission. Sometimes the court will direct people, or at least recommend that people talk to us. Sometimes the court or a magistrate is the first person to see a woman applying for an intervention order, and the magistrate may recommend that woman speaks to our WDVCS staff if we're there present at the court, or contacts us through a phone link, so that we can inform the person of what our service can help with and how they might proceed with the matter. Another scheme which I mentioned, and it doesn't fall directly within our family safety and support area, but is very closely aligned, and certainly in terms of principle, is the Family Violence Cross-Examination Scheme. The Commonwealth Parliament legislated that in many cases where there are allegations of domestic and family violence, personal cross-examination should be banned. In other words, that a perpetrator would not be able to cross-examine their victim, and also that a victim survivor shouldn't be able to cross-examine, or shouldn't need to cross-examine the perpetrator of the offence or offending. That's an awful thing for someone to have to go through. So there are two bases. There's firstly some mandatory ban, which basically means, for example, if there's an intervention order in place between two parties to a proceeding, then that's an automatic ban that they can't cross-examine each other. One can't cross-examine the other. In some cases, there are allegations of domestic and family violence, but not actually an intervention order. And in that case, a judge may need to make a determination about whether cross-examination should be banned, and the legislation gives some guidance about that. So that's a very important principle, and the flow-on effect of that is that if someone is banned from being able to cross-examine, then they either need to hire a private lawyer so they can go ahead and their lawyer will undertake the cross-examination for them, or else if they can't afford to have a private lawyer, that they can apply through the Legal Services Commission for funding for legal representation under the family violence scheme. And that funding will in fact potentially fund both parties in some cases, so that nobody is denied access to justice. The ban is very important because these kinds of court proceedings are extraordinarily taxing emotionally, they're stressful, and they're especially more so when there's allegations of domestic and family violence. Cross-examination can be re-traumatising and triggering for victim survivors, and for, as I've said earlier, having to cross-examine their perpetrator would also be inappropriate and traumatic. So this scheme allows both parties to have access to a lawyer to perform this process for them. I also want to talk about another part of our organisation, not part directly of the Family Services Division, sorry, the Family Law Division, but operates as a foundation really of legal services, which is our Legal Information and Advice Division, LEAD for short. And this is a free service, whereas, and it's available to anybody, whereas our domestic family violence programs are primarily funded to assist women, other than our FAST programs and our mental health social work program. LEAD is available to anybody. It's a free service. As you can see on the screen, there's a telephone advice line. You can have free legal appointments up to about half an hour with a lawyer. And so it's a good scope service that covers all of the kinds of problems that people run into. And it is often the case that victim survivors of domestic and family violence may not feel ready at a point in time to disclose their circumstances to a lawyer. They might want to gather information or referrals or advice about what their options might be without necessarily going into great detail. So LEAD provides that opportunity for accessible legal advice, information and referrals. And as I said, it could be, there's an advice line, there's half-hour appointments, and there's also the possibility of referrals to external services or to our internal teams. Mental health social worker referrals can be made by LEAD. It's notable that while statistically women are at greater risk of experiencing domestic and family violence, it's recognised that there is a gap in services available for men, and LEAD can also assist with men. In relation to, sorry, you're going to do that one, Gemma?
That's all right. So we've touched earlier on the fact that we have a team of mental health social workers at Legal Services, and they were first integrated at the Commission in 2022. I think at that time we had just a couple of social workers. Since then, the team has grown and expanded, and they can accept referrals from not only the teams within the Family Law Division, but also referrals from LEAD, as Stephen was just saying before. And they're also now integrated into the Family Court through FAS and also into the Magistrates Court to some extent as well. It's not necessarily a new concept to have social workers integrated into a court setting. We know that victim survivor support officers have been around for some time, but Legal Services has developed a model of integration that allows for the court and lawyers to make referrals to social workers, and it's really important. Within Legal Services, the social workers can connect victim survivors with required support services that they need. I guess as a lawyer, even though we might be able to recognise that the victim survivor requires a certain service, we don't have that really detailed understanding of what services exist that social workers do have. As well as that, social workers can provide trauma-informed assistance for victim survivors and help them to feel empowered and safe and hopefully prevent re-traumatisation as well. And that's particularly important when someone is going through a legal process, which, as we know, can be very stressful and potentially re-traumatising. And the social workers can help educate lawyers in delivering trauma-informed practice with clients, which then helps us lawyers because it improves the relationship that we have with our clients. It improves trust and rapport building. And further to that, having social workers around just simply eases the burden on one single profession in having to help a victim survivor with all of the complex needs that they may have. And social workers are really important in the court setting. They enhance the court's ability to address issues that might be underlying the legal case. They help to promote fairness, efficiency, and just outcomes. They promote the victim survivor's voice being heard, and they bridge the gap between the court and social services and allow for that continuity of care. They can also try and support the rehabilitation of perpetrators as well.
Thanks, Gemma. So one of the things that I mentioned earlier was about how FAS operates throughout the country, and how that happens in most states is through a legal services commission, rather like ours. They're all a little bit different in each state, depending on their structure and so forth, but collectively, there's an organisation called National Legal Aid, where we cooperate with all of the other commissions around issues like family law, dispute resolution, and so on. And National Legal Aid is our way that we can be efficient in terms of producing programs for our staff across the country, across Australia. And one of the areas that has been identified, perhaps unsurprisingly in hindsight, is that lawyers are not always very trauma informed. And the recognition is that lawyers should be trauma informed, that lawyers, it's not about training them to be therapists or anything like that, but it's about training them so that they can recognise trauma when they see it, so they can be trauma informed, and so they can assist clients better in meeting their legal needs. And so National Legal Aid, which is, as I said, across all of the commissions, has developed this scheme called With You. And it's trauma-informed training for lawyers. It's been designed by National Legal Aid in conjunction with, or by a collaboration between the Legal Aid Commissions, the community legal centres, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander legal services, family violence prevention legal services, the judiciary of relevant courts, tribunals, and allied health services. So it's an attempt to pull together a whole lot of information to create a training program that we hope will enrich the work that lawyers are doing in this space. Because a lot of lawyers now within family law are dealing with people who've experienced or are experiencing family and domestic violence. The training is designed for working with people experiencing distress, poor mental health, suicidality, and other challenging circumstances arising from family and domestic violence, other trauma situations. It's especially important in the domestic and family violence space due to the complexity of the clients that lawyers in this space are working with, and the importance that we avoid re-traumatising clients, and that we understand how best to communicate with clients in order to support the best outcomes for them. Some of the measures that are supported by the With You program include self-reflection, creating safe spaces for emotional work, trauma-informed supervision of lawyers by the lawyers, self-care. One of the questions that we're asking more and more in recruitment of lawyers is, what do you do about self-care? Because that's now recognised as an important part of being a trauma-informed professional. Training and support for supervisors, identifying burnout within our own staff for vicarious trauma, and dealing with issues like how we practice our jobs as lawyers. This program means that lawyers are being trained by professionals by social science professionals to recognise and respond to trauma. In fact, social science professionals and trained lawyers. And the program is, as I've noted, being rolled out to all legal aid organisations across Australia. And we've had the program run for about 3 days in South Australia, just within the last three weeks. And quite a number of our staff have started to engage with that and attend those. It's in a e-learning format, but also face-to-face. Thank you. So here we have some contact information, as promised earlier. The main number, if you only have time to write down one number, the 1300 one will get you to most places. But we also have numbers for our grants area, our integrated services, Woodvicus, and our FAST services too. And just to note, we have a number of offices through South Australia. Appointments can be conducted in any of our offices, or they can be conducted by telephone, or sometimes in a health setting. Gemma mentioned earlier about our program with the Women's and Children's Hospital, and we have someone there, I think it's one day each week, isn't it, Gemma?
Yes, yeah, in the morning.
Who's available to see people who need that assistance in that location. So we have a fair amount of flexibility. If you have any other questions, want to refer someone, please speak to us. I've just been handed a question. I want a question. Are there plans for Woodvicus to assist in Port Augusta, Whyalla, Piri, I assume that's Port Pirie, and Ceduna courts? I can probably answer that. Relatively recently, just in the last year, we've introduced sending our staff regularly every 2 weeks down to Mount Gambier. Our Woodvicus staff there, coinciding with when the court down there is having its domestic and family violence lists. And that's been more challenging probably than we ever realised, but we have a small office down there where our staff can attend, and we attend the court and engage with people in that space and obviously represent people there. And we're using that as a bit of a model for how we might then engage more in Port Augusta, Whyalla, Port Pirie, Ceduna and so on. We have offices up there. We have an office in Port Augusta and we have an office in Whyalla, and we do have staff from our domestic violence unit going up every couple of weeks. But in terms of actually regularly appearing in those courts, we tend to be more appearing on demand or assisting people remotely. But that's a work in progress, and I think you'll see some progress in that over the next year or two. I certainly hope so.
I'd just add there, if you do have a client who lives in those areas and you're not sure where to refer them, I'd encourage you to contact FSIS, the Integrated Services team, because of the fact that we do have lawyers in the domestic violence unit that do regularly, as Stephen said, regularly attend up there. So if you're unsure, contact FSIS and we'll speak to you.
That's a very important point that Gemma's just made, that our lawyers are not siloed. If someone's working in the Woodvicus team, that doesn't stop them from helping people in other areas. Our domestic violence unit staff engage across quite a wide frame. And so if you talk to one of our FSIS staff, chances are, well, I'm sure that they'll be able to help you or redirect you in the right space so that the best assistance is given. Yeah. The next question. That's an interesting question. The question is there the ability for FDRPs, which is family dispute resolution practitioners, and private lawyers to access the trauma-informed training? And I have to say that I'm not sure what the current status of that is, but I believe in relation to the trauma-informed training that it will be possible to access the e-learning, but I'm not sure about time frame for that. What I'd suggest, if the questioner or anybody else who's interested in that issue likes to contact me or one of my team, we'll give you a definitive answer on that. But I think the intention is certainly that trauma-informed training will be available to lawyers who are working in this space. It's not intended to be an exclusive club. Thanks. Not sure if anybody's got any other questions there. Please feel free to put them in the chat. We've got a little bit more time up our sleeve, if that's helpful. Would just perhaps, while just while people perhaps are reflecting on if there's any other questions, just identify, going back to the question about Port Augusta and Whyalla, one of the things about South Australia is it's a big state geographically, and a lot of the activity is in Adelaide, and then there's Mount Gambier obviously, and Port Augusta and so on. And we have offices in those northern towns and also in Adelaide. But it's a very hard state in many ways to service, not unlike perhaps Northern Territory, which also has some real challenges in terms of distance and remoteness. But we do our best with telephones. And the other issue is we're often having to work with interpreters because it's a very diverse state in terms of the languages people speak. And so we have those facilities that if someone's first language is not English, then once we can identify that, we can arrange an appropriate interpreter. So I think that's a valuable thing to be able to do, and often it has to be by phone in some cases. We do have a facility we're looking at setting up as a trial in Port Lincoln, which is a virtual office type concept where people can go to an office, a community office, which is a safe, secure place, and connect to our staff in Adelaide by a screen connection, a secure screen connection. And we think that's quite an exciting development. And I can say that Western Australia, because we're following their lead, they have about 24 of these located around their state. And that has proved to be very successful in the family law and domestic violence space. So that's something to look out for. We're just trialling that at this stage. But once again, I'm hopeful that we might better use that as a way to access and provide services to people who are very remote, accepting that telephone isn't always the best thing. If you can actually see someone, it's a better and more pleasant experience. That's what we believe, yeah.
I can see another question on the chat. I'll just read it out. We've noticed that generally it's the women and children that leave the home in order to find safety. With support services stretched to the limit, are there any legal avenues for having the perpetrator removed from the home so that the mother and the children can stay in the home and don't become homeless? It's a tricky question. The first thing that comes to mind is that if there is merit for the victim to apply for an intervention order, then an intervention order can contain a condition that the perpetrator is required to vacate the home. But ultimately, that's not going to necessarily work in every situation. More broadly speaking, again, it's gonna come down to the circumstances, I think, and it's a difficult question to answer. But I think generally it just speaks to the fact that there probably needs to be some more and better interventions in place for women and children in that situation. I don't know whether you've got anything to add there, Stephen.
We had a recent situation that comes to mind where a woman and her children were essentially forced or needed to move out of the family home due to a violent situation. They moved into a refuge briefly, but then an intervention order was applied for, and the term of that intervention order enabled the mother and the children to return to the family home while they sorted out what they were going to do, and then subsequently they then did move to other accommodation. So it certainly can be achieved. The challenge is it's very difficult to remove a perpetrator in a lot of circumstances, but sometimes, at least at the outset, but sometimes once the woman has moved into a refuge and is getting support in that context, it can be possible to sort out things so that a better outcome is achieved in the short term. That's probably about as best I can say, because of course every situation is very unique. The allegations are unique, what we're working with in it, so it requires really an intake process to say, okay, what options might be available here? How do we navigate that and get the best outcome we can?
I guess it's also worth mentioning that there is the Royal Commission into Domestic, Sexual and Family Violence that's ongoing at the moment. And, these are the kind of questions that hopefully are being looked into really carefully through that commission inquiry, and hopefully can be addressed through some measures in the future. Don't think we've got any other questions in the chat there at the moment. We might have one from Sonia coming through. No? All right, never mind.
No pressure, Sonia. All right. Well, look, we'll wrap this up. We'll be back next year with some more seminars. And so hopefully if you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter, Keeping Connected, there's a link available on our website. You'll get updates and keep an eye out for those webinars. We're very committed to this sort of form of education and getting information out to people. Very grateful for you joining us today. It's great to have a good number of people engaging in this space. And we look forward to having communication with you in the new year. I think we've got some of those things where we're looking at, for example, changes to wills and estates law, and the importance of, and I think those changes, I think there's some changes that are due to occur in the state in January next year, which is not very far away, and the importance of planning ahead in relation to those kinds of changes, regardless of your age or circumstances. So, and that may not be relevant to every one of you, but I'm sure it'll be relevant to some of you, and other seminars as the year progresses. So thank you all. Appreciate your attending. Take care of yourselves. Have a good day.